So good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Helen Beal and welcome to today's Range 4 webcast. Today we're going to be talking about DevOps, the Harmonious Polygamous Marriage, and I'm joined by my colleague Daniel Breston. Hello, Daniel.
Hello.
And we're going to be chatting through the subject together. So let's start with some scene setting. Let's just talk for a few minutes about what's different about DevOps. We used to spend a lot of time defining DevOps with people, but most people find it difficult to come to some kind of exact agreement of what DevOps is all about. So we tend to talk about why DevOps has so much currency in today's market. And the first reason I always cite is the digitization of the market. So the increasing use of the internet, social, mobile devices, all of that, and the way that that has pushed businesses to innovate faster to keep up with their competition and provide additional services to the customers. That in turn has pushed pressure onto the development teams to push change through the organisation. And on the other side of these more traditional organisations, we often have decades old infrastructure that has become quite fragile over time as more integrations and more platforms and more flavours of different software and hardwares have been used into the infrastructure. So you have this conflict between development and operations as people are fighting for change against stability. The second thing I'd cite when we talk about what's different about DevOps is the maturity of the methodologies, Agile, ITSM, and Lean. And this is what we're really talking about when we talk about this harmonious polygamous marriage, is the relationship between these frameworks or methodologies and how they have led to the evolution of DevOps. And finally, the third piece of the puzzle I like to talk about when we say what's different about DevOps is really the tooling and the automation that's become available in the last 5 or 6 years, things that have enabled us to do things like release and deployment management, service virtualization, application performance monitoring at business transaction level, things in a different way from what we've been able to do before to help those departments work together more effectively. Daniel, would you have anything to add at this point?
Not just yet.
Okay, so the next slide, I've done a couple of Google Trends graphs today. So here's the first one, it's just on DevOps. We can see since sort of 2010 when the term sort of started to emerge as a Twitter hashtag from Patrick Dwyer initially, and it's become a very, very popular term since then. You can see it's quite a steep curve in interest. I then ran some other Google Trends searches, as you can see here. So I've now added some additional search terms around ITSM, ITIL, Agile, and Lean IT. And we noted a few things here. One, that steep curve that we'd noted earlier with DevOps is somewhat kind of depressed actually by the high results that we've got around ITIL and Agile. And we can see the interest in ITIL kind of sliding down there. Whilst interestingly, the ITSM interest looks very flat. I perhaps would have expected that to be rising to meet the ITIL line dropping down. What would you think there, Daniel?
I'm surprised to see IT service management down like that versus ITIL, but I think ITIL is so much of the IT service management framework and ideology, as we're going to talk about in just a little bit, that I guess having ITIL as high as it shows is not to be unexpected. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I would have thought service management or IT business relationship management would be higher.
Do you remember we also ran the chart the first time around with just Lean, and then we decided that was too broad a term and possibly would include manufacturing as well. So we brought it back to Lean IT. I'm quite surprised to see that so low and so flat. Do you think that's going to increase?
I think Lean IT will increase because now there are more books coming out. Someone will mention just a little bit, just finished writing a book. And it's also starting to appear in conferences that are non-Lean related. So you have people talking about Lean in other webinars that we do in the Lean IT industry itself. So I think Lean is now being adopted and adapted by a bunch of individuals. So that growth should start to occur.
I'd agree.
I'm glad to see that it's part of the DevOps, culture. I've been a long fan of it for the last half decade.
Yeah. So let's have a quick chat about where Agile's at. So I first remember talking about iterative software development, particularly DSDM, at a little software startup vendor that I worked at about 15 years ago. I remember then the next company, there was a big chat that we had about with the WebSphere consultants and developers there about whether they were going to develop in a waterfall or an iterative manner. And most customers I think that we work with at the moment are doing Agile or have started to do Agile, but I think there's still a way to go to have full maturity. Now, I know that your background's a little bit more from the ops side than the dev, kind of counter to mine, but what do you see from your perspective?
I, I see two things. The first thing is I see organizations that equate the word agile with agility. And they want agility in what they're doing and think that agile will get them there. And while agile is very good at creating a product or a new service with the people that do creation, it doesn't necessarily give you the agility that people always want in an organization. So that's one problem. On the flip side, though, to overcome that, Agile and the practices within Agile, Kanban, how do you do stand-ups? Taking IT service management tools and providing them with the ability to integrate across the organization so that collaboration and communication better occurs. Asking the operations guys not to be so process-oriented, to allow that flow of work, of idea to realization to occur, still in a governed way, but with less of the manual interfaces or meetings that occur currently today. So that dev, project management, can we have this now, please, versus the operations wanting stability and governance is starting to go away. And I think that mix of agile, what we'll talk about with lean and IT service management, this movement called DevOps is facilitating that.
And as you know, I do quite a lot of chats around kind of organizational change and things and how DevOps is affecting that. And I often say that I think I've observed that Agile drives some of the initial organizational changes in the development teams, particularly by focusing around product owners and getting a bit closer to the business requirements there. Do you think that is kind of like the first place that Agile is making changes? Is it difficult for ops to catch up with those sort of changes that developers are making?
No. Well, the first question you asked is Agile helping the organization to go from, okay, let's just make some developers better and faster and safer, to let's make a way of creating a way to create products and ensure that the products that we create are good products and what we want to be able to give to a company, which is what Agile was really driving at. I think what organizations are now realizing is that to do that, they need to include the whole value stream of people that are involved. And that includes suppliers, that includes ops, that includes all your cloud vendors, that includes the people who give you your tools, that includes business relationship people such as HR, purchasing, legal. So that whole spectrum of individuals that IT service management has traditionally tried to get to is now starting to go in. And the other thing is that Agile and IT service management and Lean all have, people over process, big Agile statement, and continual improvement of what we're doing, continual improvement of the people that are involved and the way that they're managed, communicated, and rewarded. So I think the worlds are starting to come together now. It's a nice thing to see.
Okay, so let's talk about ITSM. Where did ITSM come from? What's its relationship with ITIL?
Once upon a time, there was a government, the UK government, wanted to be able to improve the things that they were doing in terms of the use of technology. And they asked a bunch of individuals across the planet to go and submit knowledge paperware, because this was 27, 28 years ago, about how do you go and take strategy to live in an organization? What is the best way to run a data center? What is the best way to plan an application and create it? And what are the major processes that would come out of that? And some of them were business-related processes, like how do you manage the financials? How do you manage business continuity? And some of it was strictly service desk related. What is an incident? What is a problem? How do you fix that? How do you do capacity management at the operations engineering level? So it was a very IT service management structure that over the last 26 years has become a framework and now a standard, depending on ISO 20000 or other standards that come out of service management. And who does what, when, and why, and how do you keep where you're going? Some indicators of performance that are key, but people that have adopted and adapted, which was always the goal of IT service management, the 3,000 or so pages that are in the books, have experienced a very pleasant journey. People who have gone and tried to pedantically do what's in the books, turn it from a framework into their own internal standard, or have limited themselves based on the tools that the industry has given us to do IT service management, have found it to be an unrewarding framework and movement. And that's a shame, because IT service management has a lot to offer. And if you read books like The Phoenix Project or follow the blogs of people that are senior in the DevOps movement, like us, Gene Kim, we all are saying don't lose the basis of what we're trying to do, which all comes from IT service management.
So when we were at the ITSM forum yesterday, one of the speakers threw out a word that he associated very strongly with DevOps, which was velocity. So we know that doing DevOps means that we want to do things better and faster. How does ITSM complement that?
We have a life cycle within IT service management, and no matter what framework you use for IT service management, it has a framework, and it starts with, and it's very similar to Agile. What is it that we're being asked to do? Requirements. What do we have to do to be able to build or create or manage or develop whatever it is that we're being asked to do? What kind of technologies do we have to put in place to support that? How do we know that it's going to be up and running correctly? How do we know what to do when it fails? So, and how do we improve that whole thing over time so that the business can benefit from technology? So that's always been the questions that IT service management has tried to answer over the last quarter century. And it's still the primary questions of which IT service management are based. The interest in velocity is there's the misconception that you cannot do IT service management in short 2-week sprints. And there are lots of individuals in the IT service management world that says that's just not true. The books don't limit you. There are customers out there, our own customers, that have very governed processes based on IT service management that allow them to match the velocity of the organization to say, this is a new product, this is a new feature, let's get it up and running, we're all ready. And I think IT service management, the blend of that with Agile, is a wonderful thing.
Okay, so let's move on to the third partner in this marriage. Let's talk a bit about Lean. So maybe you can tell us first of all who these chaps are.
Well, these two individuals, Mike Gorson on the left and Steve Bell on the right, are Lean individuals with a large manufacturing background, but then they've also worked as accountants or in the technology field. And 6, 7 years ago, they wrote a book called Lean IT. And it was the book that started to introduce the practices of lean from the manufacturing environment into the technology scope. They created a conference to talk about it. They went around the world talking about it. They do webinars. And they got me interested to also speak at their conferences and their webinars about lean, how to benefit from lean. And it was amazing to see the overlap between lean and IT service management. They look at continual service improvement almost identically to the way that we do continual service improvement. They look at problem management and consideration of what is a problem, how do we solve that problem, whether it's the business problem or whether it's a technology problem. And their focus is always on at least two things. One is respect for people, all the people that are involved, and one is, remember, we're doing this for the customer. Even if you're an NGO, you still have a customer. You have somebody that's going to be using the technology that you are introducing, and nowadays you can't do anything almost without technology. So, lean is there to help you do that. I think some of the big differences were, at least with IT service management, is our concept of a very large, cumbersome business case, which is the biggest example, lean does on one page. Our concept of having a bunch of meetings, which is what IT service management suggested years ago, lean does by saying, do you really need that meeting? Is there a way to automate the requirements and authority for that meeting so that you can get away from it? So lean added some techniques to the toolkit of IT service management to make it have more agility and velocity, but without losing better and safer. I also think that lean helped drive the movement of Agile. Agile looked at what lean was doing and said, we can learn from this. We can make ourselves more agile by adopting and adapting the techniques that are coming out of lean. So their book, their thinking, their philosophy went and drove a lot of change.
So I'm not sure how politically correct this is, but how would an organization identify how fat as they are, and then from there, how would they figure out how to become leaner? What kind of exercises or things would they do?
What the lean world would suggest is know your purpose. What is the purpose of the organization? And if you know your purpose of the organization, you can then start to look at what do you need to do that purpose. So business processes or technology processes. You can start to think about who has to do what when. And you can ask the question, why do we have to do that way? And why does this person or piece of kit have to do that? And if we can answer those questions, we can start to differentiate between what is good and what is bad, what is red and what is green. And that allows us to create indicators of performance that are key in such a way that what we want to do and when we need to have it done by now can match what the organization requires. We want to build a car. Well, why do you want to build a car? And you can continue down this road all the way up until you now have a car in front of you and the key requirements for the car. A great story about Lexus is the initial two key indicators of performance for Lexus was the sound of a door when it closed. It needed to be solid, and the overall price to create the car. And then the car itself was built in a room, and everything that was added to that, every time they did something, they checked. So there was a lot of feedback involved, and there was a lot of recognition for the people that were doing it that, we went and introduced this piece of, we introduced a new type of wheel. It didn't make the door sound like it was supposed to. We introduced another type of wheel. That same philosophy now is in the Agile world of creation, feedback. and getting operations involved as well in monitoring, creation, feedback. Is it still up and running? What have we done to the rest of the network? What does the customer think? What's their experience? Is it 1 or 2 seconds? Because if it's longer than that, they might go to another page and forget all about it. So that whole end-to-end value chain, Lean helps organizations address, and we overlay it with DevOps by making sure that technology is matching that.
So you talked about
people and continuous improvement.
So you talked about bad and good back there, and I know that you and I have talked before about kind of a binary kind of traffic light indicator where we skip amber and we just go to green and red. But we also talk about good, bad, great a lot. Can Lean help us understand what great looks like?
Yes, Lean has a concept called the North Star. So the scariest North Star in IT is you go over to your CIO and you say, how do you know that your service desk is having a good day? And the service desk says, the CIO says, well, it doesn't look like the lights are lit up. Looks like we're closing incidents within the time frame we promised in our service level agreements. There's no priority one, so we must be having a good day. And what Lean says is, that's nice. What you've just told us is you now know how to do your day job, and your service desk is doing the day job. The question we really want you to ask is, why do you have a service desk to begin with? Who actually gets paid to call the service desk in an organization? Well, no one does. Well, then why do you have a service desk? And that starts to get people to think differently. And I think DevOps allows people to, with safety, start to think differently. They start to say, okay, well, let's set some crazy indicator of performance that's key and say, how do we think differently? How do we safely say, what will we have to do to not have things break? Where do we check that? How do we check that in that whole life cycle of ideation to realization, which leads to processes like continuous testing, no matter what we're doing within the technology movement. The other thing Lean does, and IT service management to a lot of respect, is it allows the roles involved to work more closely with customers and all the people. So Lean has a great framework for management, and management to the individuals that are doing the work, and management to the individuals that receive the work or help to provide the work. So there's a whole framework out of Lean that DevOps is adopting and adapting.
Okay, so let's recap for a moment and then let's delve a little bit deeper into ideation to realization. Can you try and summarize for us those 3 component parts and what they each bring to the DevOps party, as it were?
So from an idea or ideation point of view, Lean, IT service management, and Agile all ask the same question. Is this required? Is what you want really a wish? And until we can confirm that it's really what you want, and this is the way that you want it, is it really required? If you then say, yes, this is what we want, we can start to begin to specify that further and continue to ask you for feedback. And we can start the process of doing some type of build, integrating it into other things that we do, see whether or not it's going to give value to the business as expected or value to the customer as expected, and get that feedback to do continual validation. From a DevOps perspective, people out there might be familiar with terms of continuous integration, so daily being able to do things or at the velocity that you want, being able to do things into a common environment, and then getting ready to release it, which is a great IT service management term, in such a way that when you need to, you can deploy it out to the right people at the right time, at the right place. From an operations point of view, IT service management and Agile really kick in, because obviously there's no use spending all of this time doing something if you can't keep it up and running. So IT service management facilitates greatly the operations part, and Lean plays a role in that by making sure that the indicators that matter are the ones that are used, and in this case, it's primarily mean time to recover, repair, and restore. So what is that? How do you drive that down? And that helps then create this cycle of, okay, we realize that was nice. What do we do to have to say, can we do this better? Is there any part of this process, of this life cycle, that we can do better? Is there a new feature that we can give a customer that would benefit them, and do they really want it? And start that whole life cycle again. What Agile, Lean, and service management do is create a cycle in such a way that without lacking any governance, we can do better, faster, safer to match the velocity of the organization.
Okay. So in terms of the ideation to realization, what we're really talking about here, and you talked about this a moment ago, is like changing the way that we work and looking at things differently. I think DevOps has brought to the party an opportunity to really get to grips with how much a feature is worth when it goes live, and being able to not only measure the cost of making that feature happen, but also real time being able to monitor how much that feature is bringing back to the business. Is that an important component of what DevOps is trying to do to you?
Yes, I think Lean is very value focused. IT service management is very value focused. I think being able to prove the value, not when we release it to the customer and then realize we spent all this time and money and it's rubbish, but at every single step, so that we don't waste time, money, and effort, is of paramount importance to the philosophy of DevOps. DevOps also allows management at any level to be more involved in what's happening within the organization and the use and management of that technology. So the favorite questions are being able to answer these questions, which is, what obstacles are we removing today? Or what goal did we enable today via technology that provided value to the organization? Value in the terms of customer attraction, value in the terms of customer retention and satisfaction, value especially in the terms of the employees that are involved, and then shareholder value.
So given that we see a lot of organizations that we work with starting DevOps with, for example, building a CD or continuous delivery type pipeline, if we fundamentally believe that DevOps is the evolution and the drawing together of Agile, Lean, and ITSM, where does that tell us that we should start a DevOps transformation?
One of the things that DevOps suggests is that you change the way that you think, or shift right. And we build something, we go from, okay, we have an idea, let's go build it. Yep, looks like we think we have a good idea. Let's put it live and see whether or not anybody would really want it. And what DevOps does is force you almost to say, you have an idea, let's go talk to the customer first. Let's see whether or not it's a good idea or a bad idea, but from the customer's perspective. If the customer thinks it's a good idea, what would we have to do to keep it up and running, or to provide it to the customer in the way that would keep the customer happy? And now that we kind of know that, let's go and create a way of testing what we are going to go and build in such a way that as we now build it, that idea is validated. So it takes the ideation circle and almost turns it in reverse. So it goes from ideation back to the idea again. And that's the lovely thing about DevOps, is that to do that, and to do that well, and to do that with any type of velocity, you need the whole organization involved.
Okay. So we've reached the end of our 30 minutes. What would be your final statement to the audience that we've had here today?
Start with something. Just start. Listen to the webinars, read the Phoenix Project, but pick something and start. Go and improve something today and do it in such a way that the people that are going to have to do whatever it is that you want to do and live with the effort afterwards are involved. Don't do it in isolation in a process team or process group, but get everybody involved that has to go and create something. Create that collaboration and communication.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel.